Hello. Originally, my plan was to do an updated Dead by Daylight guide for when you're seeing this, but I realised that it should be quite close to whenever the next killer is out, so I thought, you know what, let's wait until then. So first of all, Pyramid Head, or Executioner, his official name, is one of the only killers I could imagine ever doing a specific guide for, if not the only one. And a few things I should make quite clear. I'm going off the assumption that anyone seeing this knows just basic stuff about Dead by Daylight, because of course this is specifically for Pyramid Head. Otherwise you may as well just watch the other guide I did, or wait for when I do the updated version. Also, another thing to bear in mind is that for a lot of killers, in fact probably every killer at some point in this game has had some kind of change. And I mean, specifically for Pyramid Head, he got a bunch of add-on changes, and his ability kind of got a slight nerf from what I remember, maybe 3 or so months ago. So I just want to make it clear that anything said here could very well be different in the future. So, with that being said, the general structure I have in mind is, first of all, I'll just give a quick run through of how his abilities work, and then go into what kind of perks or add-ons could be good on him. Afterwards, maybe show some proper examples and matches, and at the end, maybe just go through more precise things. Maybe specific scenarios of when his ability is good or bad to use, you know, what kind of loops can work better, that sort of thing. And also just overall some more advanced things about using his ability. So, let's get straight into it. Right, so I've just gone into bot lobby on Midwich. Of course I had to do the Silent Hill map for Pyramid Head. There are 2 main abilities, I'd say, that Pyramid Head has. First of all, he can put his sword down in the ground. And while he's moving like this, he does go slower than normal. However, he leaves behind this trail. As you may have noticed, this part disappeared. That's because it's near the hook. They also disappear around generators. Now, any survivor that goes on this will get tormented. There we go. So now he's tormented. There's that little heartbeat thing that's been appearing. He has this little status effect thing on his icon, which shows like a barbed wire symbol. And also, if we look, there's this barbed wire that follows him. Now, Pyramid Head has another ability. I'll get into what this tormented means in a second. But the other part of his ability is, again, when he has the sword down in the ground, he can do a ranged attack, which can go through walls, alerts, literally everything. Like that. So you can put a sword down on the ground. As you can see, it says Punishment of the Damned. Do that as a ranged attack that goes through a bunch of stuff. It's kind of hard to show here. Like that. And also, again, like, we've got a window here. You do that, you see it goes through it all. And when you have a survivor tormented, you can pick them up to go hook, or you can send them to a Cage of Atonement. This counts as a hook stage, so it counts towards the 3 hooks that you need to kill a survivor. But it sent them off all the way over there on the other side of the map. And I didn't know where they were. All the survivors did, but I do get to see when they're saved, as you could see just now. And of course there are pros and cons to using the cage over the hook. But the bottom line is, those are the 2 main things about his ability. You put down a trail, you get them tormented, you could do a ranged attack on them. And when you down them while they're tormented, you can send them off to a cage instead of hooking. Now, there is a limit to how much you can use his ability in a way. Not in the sense that you have a limited use, but as you might be able to see in the bottom left, there's that white bar charging up. When I put a sword down in the ground, it gets used up. And when it goes to the bottom, it forces me out of the sword in the ground state, I guess you could say. The same is the case for also doing his ranged attack. use it up quite a bit. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to show it, but if you send someone else to the cage and someone else who is tormented saves them from the cage, they also lose their tormented state. These bots think I have all day. Alright, there we go. So the Yuichi who was also tormented got rid of their torment by uncaging the Nia. Bear in mind that doesn't count for when they're hooked. So if you hook someone who's tormented, neither the person who got hooked or the savior gets their tormented removed. It's only if they're caged. So, let's get into the builds. Now, the build I use on Pyramid Head, I would not recommend using, to be honest. Even more so if you're new to the game. I mean, I don't even use add-ons. And also I only have one perk which actually protects generators. But that being said, there are still some things from my regular build that I would kind of recommend in some ways. Sorry, at the time I completely forgot about a few perks. So at some point I talk about what kind of builds would be good based on what you might have. So I even reached the point where if you don't have any teachable perks on any killers, and you only have like the generic ones and just Pyramid Head's teachables, especially for that point, there was something I completely overlooked. So Pinhead, like Cenobite, his official name, right now he is not available for you to get. He's still a playable character, but if you went into like the Dead by Daylight shop or whatever right now, he shouldn't appear available for you to buy. They did this with Demogorgon in the past as well. And quite sadly enough, Michael Myers will be going soon as well. Now, because they all have their own teachables, to make up for the fact they're not available, these perks then become just like generic ones anyone can get. So I completely overlooked the potential perks you could use from these people. First of all, Demogorgon is back now, so if I'm not mistaken, his perks are teachables again. But for Pinhead, Deadlock, Plaything, and Gift of Pain, they might have different names as the like generic ones. I've no idea what they are, to be honest. And when Myers goes, which will be like mid-January, there's Dying Light, Play With Your Food, and Save the Best for Last. I imagine they'll have different names as well when this happens. And just to quickly go through their perks, I'd say Deadlock is a very good one, especially for new players. It blocks a gen that has the most progress whenever a gen is done, meaning that first of all you're stopping survivors from doing a generator, and it also lets you know a generator that's being worked on that you might not have realised. Plaything, this one basically means that survivor can't hear your terror radius until they cleanse a totem, which will appear for them specifically after they get hooked. Now, as I imagine I'll say, a lot of hook related perks tend to not be that good on Pyramid Head because he loses his value because of the caging, of course, but you can only really use this, generally speaking, 5 times at most. So you don't really lose value out of this on Pyramid Head, I'd say. Gift of Pain, on the other hand, and I mean, as I'll say with Scourge Hooks later on, if you're near a Scourge Hook and then you just cage every time you're not, then you won't lose out of value for the Scourge Hook. Dying Light, I would not recommend. This is probably one of Pyramid Head's worst perks to have because it's to do with hooking survivors. You'd literally lose out on value the second you cage someone, unless they're the obsession, I suppose. I wouldn't recommend Play With Your Food either. It's a very niche perk, I'd say. And well, save the best for last. As you may have noticed, that's what I use in my regular build. It's a pretty good one. You don't gain or lose tokens when you use Pyramid Head's ability. You could do a bunch of basic attacks on everyone and then the ability on just the obsession or something like that. It's a similar idea with killers like Demogorgon. But the point is, Save the Best for Last is probably Myers' best for Pyramid Head, and Deadlock is probably the most solid one here from Pinhead. Although again, I can imagine Plaything having quite good value as well. But with that being said, I'll go back to the past here. So first of all, I'm All Ears and Nurse's Coolin'. They are both to do with aura reading, to do with being able to see the survivors. Pyramid Head's ability literally goes through walls, so being able to see their aura when they're nearby, very good. You can get a lot of survivors thinking you're an actual hacker. So overall, a lot of aura reading perks are quite good on him. So that'd be Nurse's Cooling. As I already said, I'm all ears, very good. And overall, I'd say this is probably Pyramid Head's best aura reading perk at all. By far, out of my entire time playing, this has got to be the most value for him. Nowhere to Hide could also work really well. Lethal Pursuer, you could technically argue Floods of Rage is good. I haven't really looked into this perk too much, but Wandering Eye, I can imagine this being good on Pyramid Head if you actually get value from it. And then I suppose also Zanjin Tactics could be very nice. And then finally, I suppose you could also say Thwack. Also, I don't know how I skipped past this one, but Predator is also very good. But overall, I'd say I'm All Ears is probably his best. If you're new, maybe Nowhere to Hide or Lethal Pursuer. They could work really well. Lethal Pursuer if you're not confident in finding out where survivors are at the beginning of the match. Nowhere to Hide for, well, when you kick a gen and someone's maybe hiding about somewhere. If not, maybe Zanjin Tactics, because you see them whenever they drop pallets, of course. I'd say if you had to choose just one perk, go with I'm All Ears. If there's a second one after that, as I was saying, it kind of depends on how it is for you. Maybe not Lethal Pursuer as much, unless you really aren't confident on getting to survivors at the beginning, because part of Lethal Pursuer is of course the extra 2 seconds of aura reading it gives for all of the other perks or power stuff you might have. But I'm All Ears already gives you 8 seconds of aura reading, so an extra 2 seconds isn't really that valuable, to be honest. So I'd definitely argue maybe I'm All Ears and Nowhere to Hide. Of course, Nurse's Cooling, the one that I use, can work very well. The amount of times survivors actually get caught off guard by it or something else, I can't really confidently say you can get it that often. Because these also kind of work as an information perk as well, I feel like running some other kind of thing to know where survivors are might be a bit excessive. So in a lot of ways, it can probably be best just to run gem protection perks for the rest. The only other kind of perks I can think of are like a chase perk, but Pyramid Head's power, as you may have guessed, is pretty good for chase. Brutal Strength or Enduring, those are quite common examples of chase perks. Both of them don't really get as much value for Pyramid Head, I'd say. And because part of his power is also to do with caging survivors, a lot of the perks related to hooking aren't as good for him either. Don't get me wrong, they can still be good, but they're not as good as every other killer in the game. Same goes with picking up, of course, so Forever Entwined or Fire Up, they tend to not give you as much. Which overall is why I'd say maybe go for generator perks. So of course Ruin, which is the one generator perk I use, that works very nicely for him. The one hooking perk related to gens, which doesn't really get worse with Pyramid Head, is Pain Resonance, because you can only use it on each survivor once, so it's not perks like Pop Goes the Weasel where it's every time you hook. So you could do Pain Res and Ruin. That's quite a classic combo, I'd say, nowadays. Also perks like Surge, that only activates on basic attacks. You get downs quite often with his ability rather than basic attacks, so doesn't get as much value either. So overall, unless you're running perks like this, I'd definitely say ones that just work from you kicking a gen. So maybe Eruption, perhaps even Oppression. I might explain later on for why that one specifically could be quite nice. If you want a bit more information, you could go with Call of Brine, that lets you know when survivors are also on generators. But in fact do Eruption Call of Brine. That combined with Nowhere to Hide means that whenever you kick gens, you see where the survivors are, you know when they're back on that gen, and when you down a survivor that gen blows up. I literally just came up with this build as I'm talking, by the way. This might actually be like a really solid build for him overall. You could also sacrifice one of your gem perks, let's say you're using Eruption, but instead of like Call of Brine or something, you could instead run Trail of Torment or Unforeseen. Again, those are to do with kicking gens. Trail of Torment is one you'll have with Pyramid Head, by the way. It's one of his teachables. That means when you kick a gen, you'll be undetectable until that gen stops regressing. So either when a survivor is back on that gen, or when that gen is completely dead. So if you don't mind losing out on the extra 150% regression speed extra from Call of Brine and all that kind of stuff, you could technically go with Trail of Torment as well instead. I'd say this is actually a pretty solid build. If you have these perks and you're new to the game, this could actually be a very good one to go for. But that being said, especially if you are new to the game, you're not going to have every perk possible. So if I were to just go off Pyramid Head perks, and maybe just like the generic ones, or maybe even the other teachables that you get from the default killers, Trail of Torment is the best perk that Pyramid Head has for him. Deathbound, I'd say, is a pretty good one. It doesn't have Aura Reading or anything. I definitely see Nurse's Cooling is probably better in that scenario. So, if I were to go off a build that you'd have, first of all, Trail of Torment is a pretty solid one, I'd say, to use. Nurse's Cooling, if you have it, for the Aura Reading. There's no actual gem regression perk that you get at the beginning. That's crazy. I know for some people, Hag is a free killer at the start. So if you have her, maybe Vern could be a good one to get. I suppose technically Overcharge, if you have Doctor for free as well. But if you don't have those, I'm not sure what I'd recommend. So if there isn't a perk that can protect generators for you, I suppose you'll maybe want a haste perk perhaps, so that you can get around the map quicker to protect gens easier. Either that or just more information, I suppose. I mean, to be fair, Whispers is always a solid one if you're brand new. Or perhaps Spies from the Shadows, depends on which one you find easier using. And again, even if you don't have these perks, this can be even trickier to work out. You might have to just not have Aura Reading at all, so you could just use Pyramid Head's perk just for more information, I suppose. Screw it, maybe Noed. I don't even know at this point. I suppose on the bright side, if you're this new to the game, you should ideally not be running into survivors who know what they're doing either. So you might not have to worry about as many things like generators getting done. But overall, I'd say probably these two perks from Pyramid Head and maybe Whispers or Spies would probably work best if you're completely new. Now, one other thing I was just going to quickly explain was, I think I said earlier, with perks like Oppression, I said this one could be good because basically you're pressuring gens that are potentially really far away. Now, this is because even though Pyramid Head is the regular speed of killers, as you may have noticed when I was using his ability, he was just going slow. When he does the Punishment of the Damned, he's basically stood still, and even when just putting the trail down, with the sword in the ground, he still goes much slower. So technically speaking, I'd say he's actually one of the slowest killers for getting around the map in a way, which is why a perk like Oppression could be quite nice, and also just any haste perk. But unfortunately, I don't think there's any perks you'd have at the beginning to do with haste. Oh, apart from Noed. But I suppose just a honorary mention, a perk like Batteries Included could be pretty solid on Pyramid Head. But anyway, I'm sure I've said plenty about perks now. Alright, I think I genuinely went for like 20 minutes explaining each add-on. I'm just gonna redo what I did and just keep it down to the ones that I think are best. So this one means that your ability literally destroys walls and pallets. Very good. The only downside is that you get your ability back slower. This one means that when you hit a survivor with the ability, it's more awkward for them to then get healed later on. This painting one means that missing your ability lets you see auras of survivors nearby. I'd say these two are quite good as well. You get stunned for less time while using your ability. That happens more often than you'd think. This one means you see the aura of whoever saves someone from a cage. Because think about it, if they uncage and then you see them healing, you know exactly what they're doing. If they're running off, you know they're not healing. They could even go straight onto a gen, give you quite a bit of information. This one I see literally no downside with, nothing but a good thing. It literally means that your ability can reach a bit further. The black strap and the lead ring, they basically do the opposite of each other. One of them increases the width but decreases the range of the Punishment of the Damned. The other one increases the range and then decreases the width. You tend to use your ability when you're near a survivor. So when you're going around a pallet or something, that's typically when you use the ability. The most awkward part is that they can potentially dodge your attack. That's going to be harder for them to do if the width is increased. So I'd say overall this one's probably better. And then the other two brown add-ons are also just pretty solid ones, to be honest. Just means you can use the ability for longer and then you can get it back quicker with this one. So maybe these two, if you want to just seem like you're an absolutely broken killer, because this one then makes up for the downside on this one. If you miss your ability a lot, maybe this one. If you just want it to be a general improvement for you, copper ring and a dead butterfly, to be honest. So if we were to go off that, I believe those were the perks I chose earlier. So maybe if you're brand new, something like this could go pretty well. And if you have these perks, I'd argue this is actually a really good build. So you know what? I might actually play a game with this build, see how it goes. Okay, something I'm going to quickly make clear. This is actually going to be during the Bone Chill event, which is like the winter Christmassy kind of stuff. And in this, there are like snowballs and stuff you can throw about. And there's also snowmen on the map. And something that is kind of different about the regular gameplay with this is the fact that you can actually kind of block pallets with these snowballs and things like that. However, I imagine the core gameplay showing how Pyramid Head works and everything should still be just the same. Right, so we've got the Gronin Storehouse. Someone actually bought an offering we don't know of. That can typically be a hatch offering, I'd say. So we spawned around here. Survivors will probably be either down here or over there. Guess we'll quickly look here to see if they're on the generator. They're not, so I'm just going to assume they're down here now. They are not. Interesting. They might just be messing about right now, I'm not too sure. Okay, I have no idea what that means, but maybe someone's in the snowman, I don't know. Okay, here's someone. Ah, someone was over there, so they were just hiding. I see. Oh, okay. They should have gone straight to the pallet, to be honest. Okay, so this is Shack, as you may know. Pyramid Head is very good for Shack. Be smart to leave it for them. They did. Survivors often try and fake vaulting. They got stuck there. But basically, of course, the way most Pyramid Heads tend to use their ability is when survivors are going to vault a pallet or window, because you're guaranteed to hit them while they're stuck in that animation. However... Oh yeah, let's get our Trail of Torment now. Nowhere to hide, let's see. Okay, so we know this person's here. So there we go. He probably thinks I'm a hacker now. So that's the value of nowhere to hide straight away. Oh, I was slightly too late to that one. Oh. Haven't seen one of those being used in a while. Let's guess where they are. Perfect. That one was just pure, like, guesswork. Just roughly suspected them to be there. So as I was saying, survivors tend to fake their vaults at windows of pallets. So quite often it's easier for you to hold it because they'll try and dodge it. They'll try and bait you into missing, basically. Now, I think I saw someone down here earlier. Oh, there they are. Ah, they're the person I already went for. I'll be nice and leave them. Oh, okay, I'm not undetectable anymore, so someone's on a generator that I put Trail of Torment on. In fact, let's see with nowhere to hide again. Okay, we have someone there. I think they went in a snowman. Ah, yeah, got a challenge from that. Perfect. So, okay, that was smart. They'll probably re-drop the pallet now. Or not. Oh, I messed up there big time. It's risky to use your ability there because they're out in the open. You have no idea what they could be about to do. Okay, Cheer, I'm not too sure where survivors are right now, so it's easier just to send them off, and then I just get a general idea of where people are. Okay, so I know there's at least 2 people over there now. Someone's back on that gen. I know thanks to the trail I put down, so they got tormented. That's what the heartbeat was. Yeah, I think this is the first time I've seen this person running over here. So I'll go for them. Let's put 12 time on this. One person is hide. Yes, they do straight away. Okay, let's chase this person. Also, don't forget, we know someone's over there because of 12 torment from earlier. So right now, we know roughly where 3 people are. The person I'm chasing, the person who got saved by the cage. And I think they're working on that gen roughly now. That gen exploded just now because of the eruption perk I have. So that's the one where you kick a gen, you knock it, you knock a person, and then gen explodes for you. It's a very solid perk. I'm sure you can probably see why it goes quite nicely with the build. So again, people were here. In fact, let's wait a second. There we go. Because eruption looks like someone was here. Ah. Okay. People hiding in the snowman. Oh wait, they weren't hiding in the snowman, never mind. Oh. Oh, they'll drop it, yeah. Whenever Pyramid Head misses like that, people almost always drop. Okay, I'll cage him now, because I can pressure straight away like this. Ah, just missed. I'll leave him. Try and find the other person here. They've just gone to the edge. They just went around. They might pre-drop that. Oh no, okay. Survivors do tend to drop pallets very often against Pyramid Head when he's not in his ability. Tend to use my ability there, perfect. Because a lot of survivors just expect you. Ooh, that was unfortunate. They went down to the right here. Thought that would throw them off, never mind. Perfect. Someone was by that gen just now. We'll kick it with all of the perks active. Nah, no way that would make it. They're hiding behind here. I only saw that because they were tormented. Because that barbed wire's behind them. Because they're leaving no scratch marks at all. That's one nice thing about them being tormented as well. You get to see where they are easier. They'll probably go for the window. Oh no. Unless they just didn't realise pallet was dropped here. They'll fake that and then I fake this. Perfect. You may notice as well, I'm doing a weird little flick thing every time I use... Well, sometimes when I use the ability. Don't worry, I'll explain that a bit as well. But that's a bit more of an advanced thing to do as Pyramid Head. Someone was somewhere here. Maybe they went for the save. Oh no. Guess they were... Oh, there they are. I can't even think of who hasn't been hooked yet. Oh, sorry, the one who isn't dead on hook next. It might be this person. Let me see here. I think. Oh, perfect, okay. I doubt they'll call me a tunneler this time, will they? Let's send it. Oh, okay. So that's why normally you pretend to do... Oh my god, I panicked there. If I just aimed for the pallets, that would have been a down there. I don't know. Nah, yeah. Doesn't reach. I will admit, basically, Pyramid Head got changed. I imagine I'll probably say this. Well, I've already said this earlier. But basically, Pyramid Head got changed, like, maybe 3 months ago from when you're seeing this. They getting a locker there? I thought that was a... Oh. Oh! As you can see, nowhere to hide has been giving me a lot of value, hasn't it? Okay, there's the injured person. Do you reckon we could... No. It's a bit of a gamble. Yeah. So that's why when Pyramid Head's in the ability, survivors won't usually want to bolt, because that's just an easy hit. Same for going against like Huntress or perhaps Deathslinger. A lot of ranged killers. That's a chemical trap for those of you who don't know. So if I break that, I'll go like 50% slower for a fair bit of time. This is a horrible pallet for them to stay on. Perfect. Okay, I don't think I've actually said about this yet. But as you can see, he's gonna die next hook. But look, he's tormented. I can final judgment instead. So if they're tormented and they're on their final hook stage, you can actually just do a really quick kill like that. I'll leave him alone because he was one of the last people I went for. Check with nowhere to hide. Okay, no one's... We'll just hook him now. I didn't think he'd run into me like that. Maybe it's because of the undetectable. Maybe that's why. I will admit that these survivors don't seem like the best of players. Oh, I thought they were going to wrap around that. They just W-keyed. Oh, they're going around this. I think there's now a pallet here. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I think I stopped saying about something earlier. So basically, when, like, I think it was like 3 months ago or something, they basically changed Pyramid Head's base ability. Like, he now has a slightly longer range and stuff. But that means, like, I'm kind of thrown off now. Oh, lovely. If I wanted to really go for the 4K, I'd maybe slug this, but I can't be bothered to do that. I'd say this, well, even though as I was saying, I don't think these players are necessarily the greatest, I would still say it shows that this build is pretty good. And also, these probably are your kind of average players anyway. So if you're new, these are probably who you're up against. Chance at hatch here. Oh no. Maybe they bought a map offer instead. Or maybe it's for main building. Let's see now. Oh. Got thrown off there. Yeah, it looks like... Oh, here they are. See if I can cut them off here. I think they're just staying here, aren't they? Or did I not know? Oh, they sent it. High chance that they get hatch. Oh, I thought they weren't going to vault there. So I was right in front of me. No. It's always a gamble when you don't know exactly where they are. Oh, I actually fell for that one, not gonna lie. So as you can see, they pretended to vault that one. So that's very often what survivors do. I got thrown off because these survivors weren't doing much with that. Oh, that's a guaranteed hit, I believe. Perfect. In narrow areas like that, it's kind of a guaranteed hit with Pyramid Head's ability, because there was nowhere the survivor could have dodged. So for times like that, you can do your ability without any problems. And let's see what kind of perks they had. Oh man, I don't think I really said much about this, but again with the cages, perks don't really work in the same kind of ways. So Second Wind works from an unhook, Babysitter works from an unhook, Kindred works from a hook, Well Make It works from unhooking. This person's entire build doesn't work when it's a person getting caged instead of hooked. Oh, and would you look at this? I didn't even notice the person below. Breakout, that's for when the killer carries a survivor, and they have this toolbox. Their plan is to go over to me when I'm picking up a survivor, and they'll sabotage any hook that I'm trying to get the survivor on. That's actually crazy. So basically, a very significant part about these two people's builds was actually countered by being able to cage instead of picking up and hooking survivors. But anyway, I feel like luckily my point was actually proven. I will say that this build of I'm All Ears, Nowhere to Hide, Eruption, Trail of Torment, it worked very nicely, along with just these two brown add-ons. Now again, you could argue, of course, Pyramid Head is my most played killer by a long shot, and I play him at add-onless, so I'm already used to his ability being the way it is. So you could argue that maybe I was fine because I was already good enough without add-ons, let alone brown add-ons. Maybe for any of you trying this, you might prefer to have better add-ons, maybe green or blue rarity, potentially even higher. But overall, I feel like that was a pretty good build, and that was literally my first time trying it. So for this next section, I thought about just doing more tips, ones that aren't necessarily too advanced, but ones I may have overlooked previously. Right, so I get my first down here. Now, I believe in the first match I did, I literally just did cage every time, regardless. However, you may have noticed me earlier saying that there are pros and cons to the cages, so it's not always best to actually cage instead of hooking. And I feel like this situation here was a pretty good reason why. So, this generator that I'm going to now, that one's being worked on and there's a hook right there. That instantly puts more pressure on the survivor team. Especially because I know there are at least 2 other survivors in this area. Now, sure, if I sent them to the cage, and they were off on the other side of the map, some other survivor's gonna have to go all the way over there to uncage them. But here's the thing, first of all, unless I just didn't notice them, I'm pretty sure the lorry, their location is completely unknown right now. What if when I cage him, he gets sent right to where the lorry is? That makes me lose any kind of pressure I have from hooking in the first place. And as I believe I already said before, Pyramid Head isn't really good mobility-wise, anyway. Sure, he's 4.6 meters per second, he's the average killer speed, but every part of his ability makes him go way slower. Now, of course, on this map specifically, it's not as bad, because it's actually a smaller area, technically speaking. But just in general, you know, he can't easily get to where he just caged someone. And I'm not talking about tunneling that person, nothing like that. But I'm also talking about the fact that you're not really getting anything out of doing that cage in the first place. Alternatively, if you were completely certain that everyone was there, then maybe a cage wouldn't be a bad thing, because then you're forcing someone to go all the way over there. But at the same time, in this specific scenario, you are just putting so much pressure by hooking right where everyone is, because then they don't want to exactly unhook right in front of you, do they? Because they'd give you 3 hits. But like I already said before, if you don't know where anyone is, and you know, you're a bit lost on what to do, maybe caging's the better option. But in this scenario, it actually puts a lot more pressure to hook instead. Hopefully that explained it. Now, loops like this, which I'm going around right now, well, that little square thing with the hole in the middle there, that's such a really bad loop for Pyramid Head. I don't think I really said about this, but his ability, as you can imagine, doesn't actually go over anything. However, as it just showed there, it can actually go down. Doesn't work uphill, but it does work downhill. I feel like that's a bit of a lesser known thing with Pyramid Head. And that's why going around that little square thing earlier works quite well for the survivors, because Pyramid Head can't use his ability there at all. On a part like here though, he's quite good, as you can see here. Again, I'm chasing this lorry around this part. I just have to do the M1s, of course. Basic attacks, as you'd say. Got jump scared by a snowman. Okay, so there. That was a bit lucky, but I'd almost recommend, in this scenario... This was because I didn't realise that person was actually at that pallet. But if you know, like, you should definitely have your ability out by then. Actually, to be fair, because of where I was, I could have actually hit him there. I just hadn't clocked that there was someone there. But if you want to be on the safe side, it's always good to do an ability. If they drop it, you're guaranteed a hit with the ability, because they're stuck in an animation, they can't dodge that. If they leave the pallet, well, that's then a free basic attack for you. It's kind of like Huntress in that regard, if you've played her. That was stupid. Really stupid of me there. So of course in a lot of these games, again, stupid play there. In this game specifically anyway, it's not as if I'm playing perfectly either. Yeah, again, stupid moves. So that's 3 things I do really badly. So, if we go back here, first one was here. Don't do what I did here. That was just a panic. Really silly. And yes, even though I've played quite a bit of Pyramid Head, I still do this every now and then. I shouldn't have been doing stupid stuff like this. So again, here, if I'd let go from this point, that would be an M1. I could hit him before he reaches the pallet. I should have let go now, but actually, to be fair, at this point, that was a bait. So here's another thing that survivors tend to do. It's what that Dwight just did. So as you can see, he gets really close. Right, does a little spin around. Now, even when the survivors are really close to you, it's a bit risky to use the ability. So the reason why he's done that is either to bait me into using the ability, or actually bait me into getting out of the ability. It's quite smart on the survivor side. Because imagine if I let go here, look what he then does. He goes straight to the pallet. To be fair, I imagine that's probably why I missed, now that I'm looking back at it again. Because look, I aimed straight for the pallet. Maybe it wasn't a panic move. Maybe I was actually just assuming it. I don't know. Or maybe the Dwight got stuck there. Maybe he was supposed to get hit there. To be honest, if I had a bit more patience, could have gotten that. You've got to remember, it's not as if I have to instantly react to the pallet being dropped. There's a good, like, second or so, I'd say. Like, it's not as if I have to do it instantly. You can technically use the ability just as the pallet drops, I'd say, and you'd still be able to get it in time. Point is, you don't have to rush using the ability in this scenario. So that was mistake number 1. Here, this was always a gamble in the first place. He's out in the open, like, you can just dodge this. I guess I thought he was still going to spin in circles in front of me. And I mean, he kind of got saved by the locker stopping him there, but again, it was stupid on my part. Just think, from that situation, here, just like I said with the previous one, guess what I could have done here? Let go of the ability, hit him. I do that instead. So this is what I mean, you have to have a lot of patience. And here I didn't show it at all. So I could have downed him twice by now. And here was just popping on the cake or whatever you call it. That's not the right phrase, is it? But again, like, I guess I was expected him to drop it, but I was too late to that one. I had the right idea, but yeah, I was just too late to execute the plan, see what I did there. But anyway, the point from those 3 misses is that, okay, to be fair with the last one, I don't think there was anything I could have done other than just him not dodge it or something, I guess. But especially for the first 2, I could have just let go of the ability in time and M1'd him quite easily. Or alternatively, just have a tiny bit of patience and hit him with the ability. And there's one other thing I can think off the top of my head for just playing around pallets and stuff like that when they're right next to you. I'm not sure if I have any recordings of doing it. If I do, I'll hopefully be able to show it. But if you get yourself in the right scenario, you can effectively body block a pallet or window that a survivor tries to get to. And, you know, just have a bit of patience, stand still there, let go of your ability, and then that's a free hit with your basic attack. Okay, here... Oh wait, maybe I do hit that. Nah. But I think the problem is there, it would have only hit if he actually dropped the pallet. Again, tiny bit of patience I could have had there. If I just waited for the pallet to move at all, I'd know for sure that he's actually dropping the pallet. Oh, and he then drops it afterwards. As I said before, especially if you miss an ability or you're just out of your ability, they'll drop it straight away because you can't then react in time to hitting them again. And of course, because of the nature of that loop, it's really awkward because there's a gap. However, look at what I then do. Yeah. He did not expect that, did he? So this is what I mean. I don't think people really imagine having to dodge a downhill attack like that. Either that or he just doesn't look behind, I don't know. But there you go, there's proof that you can hit downhill with visibility. It's a bit more awkward to do, I'd say, because, you know, you're at a bit of an angle. Especially if you're new, I'd say most of the players you're going against won't even expect that to work. Now, this map specifically probably works a bit nicer for those kind of things, so you might not actually be able to do it that often. I imagine most outdoor maps don't really have downhill as such, but do just keep in mind that you can do that. He was kind of there, but... Okay, so I do... Oh, okay, two things. First of all, I think I already said this earlier, but there's a little flick thing like that, which I did. I'll go into that with the more advanced niche things for Pyramid Head, so I'll go into that later. But another thing, someone's just gone for the save. Here's where Pyramid Head's very good. Now, because I did that hit before they actually got the unhook, means I can do it again, which I've realised the second the person was still on the hook. Now, if I was like a split second later, it wasn't easy to tell since it was through a wall, but I could have also got an actual hit on the person who's unhooked. I could have put them straight into the deep wound. So that is something you can do with Pyramid Head. And bear in mind, when the survivor gets caged, they also get that endurance they do off hook when they're saved. It's something people don't tend to like, but you can do that as Pyramid Head. You can hit both the unhooker and the one who gets saved. Not to do with Pyramid Head, but it's something you can do. So if you look at this, I pretend that I'm just, I don't know, completely blind. Leon's thinking, oh, that's an easy pallet save. Yeah. Most people don't tend to fall for it, but especially for newer survivors, you can literally bait them into wasting pallets like that. Just a little side note. And here's value from Nurse's Coolin. And then at this point, it's basically GG. And they weren't looking behind, so I knew it was just a safe hit there. And that's another thing, right? As I was saying with Patience, if we look back, I used the ability while they were halfway over the vault. By the way, I actually looked back and this person specifically was actually live streaming because they're TTV. They had Lithe, so out of every perk in the game, that should be the one where they can then easily dodge after vaulting, of course, right? But even though I had the slight patience of waiting for them to actually vault, I was still able to hit them. So I guess that's a show of you can have a tiny bit of patience. You know, you don't have to do a prediction of them vaulting, even if it's a fast vault. The only thing I can imagine you having to be a bit preemptive with is perhaps if the survivor has finesse or possibly resilience, just something that they vault faster with, because in those situations you really do have to do it ahead of time. Those kind of perks really do let them dodge even if you are patient. So do keep that in mind, like finesse especially. So there are about 4 advanced tips I can kind of think of, just off the top of my head. A few of them, like the first 2 I'll probably go through, are more so like just a little mechanic thing that can sometimes work. One of them's hitting through stuns, another one's to do with the flicks, and then something I feel like can be a bit tricky to get the hang of, and I still mess up every now and then, is to do with when you're guaranteed a hit, as you might say, or so that you can aim in a certain way that from their position they actually just can't dodge it. And then the final thing I've got in mind is more so to do with the survivor's perspective and certain things that you may not realise that the survivors see when you're in your ability as Pyramid Head. So to start off with, quite a simple one. they're hitting through stuns. This and the flicking, I feel like are just things you need to do enough to get used to. So I believe this works for literally anything where you're already in the ability. I can't say for sure if I've ever done this before, but I believe you can also hit through head-ons as well. So there's no real way I can say how to do it. Use the ability literally just before you think you're about to get stunned, and it'll hit them while they're stunning you. There's nothing else I can really say, sadly. Now for flicks, there's a bit more to it. First of all, I never tried doing them at all until maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, as of right now anyway. Probably been well over a month when you're seeing this. And the reason why I never did it before is because I always found it very inconsistent. And also, I should just quickly say, I'm not sure if you can do it on controller. I have a feeling it's a keyboard and mouse only thing, unfortunately. It's just that when I've tried doing a substitute, like pressing the Q and E buttons on the keyboard for turning, I haven't really ever been able to do a flick. But anyway, there's quite a bit to the flicking, I'd say. It can be a bit tricky to get the hang of at first. I have found, though, that the more you do it, the more consistent you can get with it, just generally speaking. There are also times that I found it to be a bit better. So if we took a loop like here, for example, at this point, let's say you're here and the survivors are on this pallet. Well, you done a flick won't usually catch them that off guard. The whole reason of flicking, for the most part, I'd say, is you're basically going to suddenly hit where they're going to think to dodge to. So if they're on this pallet and you're aiming towards this, it's so that you suddenly hit the pallet area instead of over here. That's the whole point of flicking, I'd say, other than style points or whatever you want to call it, right? But it's for that reason that I'd say loops like this, or this, just anywhere the survivor can always see you. I've found that they tend to be more effective because the survivor's relying more on looking at you. The quality might suddenly seem a whole lot worse from this perspective, but as you can see as well, when I'm looking at the wall, it's not as if the survivor's gonna see the red stain either. So when I try and do a flick, or in fact rather if I just aimed at the pallet, you're not going to see it as the survivor anyway. That compared to that, you're not going to see really, are you? So the flicking really doesn't do much for you. So do just keep that in mind when flicking. And that's kind of what I've been finding recently from these matches where I've been trying to learn how to do it. So basically, general idea, do it when the survivor sees you. Now, to actually explain how you do it, I feel like most people probably say just to pre-fire it almost. So basically, as you've got the ability out, just rapidly try and, you know, just turn quickly as you're doing it. Well, I don't think there was any flick whatsoever there. So there is definitely a timing to it, I'd say. Again, let me try it, but actually go for the flick this time. Unfortunately, I can't really show it easily since I don't use like a hand cam or anything. But when I start moving my mouse, it's as I'm clicking. I think I did try a little overlay thing in just a bot lobby I tried where I was just doing flicks, but it was a bit awkward to show the mouse movement in that way. If it helps any of you by any means, then I'm sure I'll put a little video unlisted, this description has the link to or something like that, which you can go to. Unfortunately, there's not really too much I can explain with flicks. It's just a matter of getting consistent with the timing, to be honest. And again, also just actually aiming correctly, because if you think about it, you're actually going to have to hit where the survivor is as well while they're moving. Let's say you wanted to hit where they are at the window. This one, I hope, will hit the window. Oh, slightly overshot it. But as you can see, it's like... There we go. Kind of. Like, it's something you have to get very precise as well. So, especially if you're new, This is the one thing I wouldn't recommend trying to learn right now. The amount you gain from getting good at it is quite minimal, I'd say. Now, I have tried looking into things about the flicking, and from my understanding, there isn't really anyone who truly has like an exact guide on how to do flicks. I think people do tend to just speculate a lot, and I mean that is kind of how it is for me as well. But there are a few other things. So first of all, people probably say about like sensitivity or like DPI on the mouse. I haven't bothered changing my DPI, so I can't confirm that. I think I'm on like 800 DPI, but I can safely go on the sensitivity here. Currently on 50%. If I turn it up to 100, so I'm double sensitivity. I don't know, I personally don't really see much of a difference. I mean, maybe there is a difference. It's very hard to tell. But I would say the thing that really changes things up is your FPS limit. I always play at 120, but I do know that the lower the FPS go, the stronger the flicks can be. So 120, how I normally play. I'll try and do the strongest flick I possibly can. Okay, so it's roughly 90 degrees. Again, that was me trying to do the strong flick again, but as I've said, it's a bit inconsistent. That was like a 45 degree. Yeah, so it's like just under a 90 degree flick, I'd say, on 120 FPS. I'm not necessarily saying you can't go more than that, it's just personally for me, that's how it is. If I change it down to 90... Okay, I'm guessing that might actually be the same, funnily enough. Oh, okay, there we go. So a bit over 90 degrees. Oh yeah, okay. I can definitely get around 90 degrees. Turn it down again to 60. And I can't even think off the top of my head. What would that be, like 145 or something? White the flick. And then bring it down to, let's say, 30. At this point, I imagine you will actually see the FPS drop in the video now. Oh. Was that a 270? I think that was almost a 360. That was like a 180. So as you can see, a lower FPS definitely changes how much you can flick. And I believe it's because... I'll try and slow this down in the editor as much as I can. The moment where Pyramid Head suddenly does a jump, it's when that prompt for the punishment of the damned disappears. So I'm guessing it's because, you know, there's more time since there's lower FPS, something like that. So I suppose, to be fair, if you want to really learn how to do flicks, maybe start on lower FPS. Just do it in a custom game like I'm in now. I mean, of course, maybe just do it against bots. And here's another thing, just as a fun fact. Bots are actually really hard to hit with Pyramid Head's ability normally, like just out in the open. However, they actually can hardly dodge flicks. At the very least, they tend to get thrown off by them quite a lot. If you can consistently hit bots out in the open, not when they're in front of you, but let's say they were like here or something, and then you try doing that on them, that kind of thing. If you can consistently do that, I'd say you're pretty good at flicking by that point. Now what I'm about to say here is kind of more to do with a section I'm going to go into later on, but it's also quite good to think about how the survivor actually sees that stuff, because you might also be thinking, oh, surely if the survivor still sees something, they can possibly dodge it in time, even if it is a flick. I guess we'll see in a second. Do bear in mind there is a slight delay of this, I think, from the survivor's perspective, but of course this is going around normally. Using the ability. And then this is more like a flick. And then of course if we turn it down a bit, let's go with the crazy 30 FPS one. jump the gun a bit here. We could go 60, see how that looks again. And of course, actually when the survivor's here. That probably looks normal. But this... Oh, sorry, I forgot I still on 60. But this... hopefully made things look a bit more surprising. I reckon that's probably enough about Flicks, to be honest. Sorry, one thing real quick. I just remembered something that I don't think I mentioned yet about his ability. Nothing too crazy, and I mean you can't even do it on too many maps after all. But something I feel like is also lesser known is you can do his ability mid-air. Not the actual attack, but you can charge it up like this. So you can basically already have it ready to attack by the time you reach the ground. There aren't many occasions where it would be useful, but technically that's a thing that could help. So one thing first of all, if you try doing the ability while mid-air, like, it just does nothing, right? So you do have to wait to actually hit the ground, but I suppose in a place like this it could work. I was a bit late there for that kind of thing where there's a pallet straight away. Maybe here in a weird way. I suppose if you wanted to drop down and suddenly do an attack. If I can actually do it, that is. Like that, I suppose. It's a bit of a niche thing, I know, but just another little fun fact. So I'd say there were two different types of guaranteed hits, both of which I believe were actually shown in the match I fully played earlier on. So one of them is a bit more simple, I'd say, and it's just when the survivor is locked in some kind of animation. The main one's to do with when they vault a window or a pallet, or perhaps drop a pallet. There's only one real sign of when that can happen, and it's simply when the survivor is holding an item, because when those survivors actually do those animations, their item will disappear during that time. I personally tend to not really pay attention. I usually only notice when it's a medkit that they're holding or something like that, but other than that, I don't think I really need to explain those kind of guaranteed hits. So I'm just going to go straight into the other type. Rather than them being in an animation, it's actually just that there's no place they can dodge. And the reason why this one can be a bit trickier is because this is purely based on where you aim. Also, just as a little side note, both of these hit types of course also work on bots. I was saying earlier how bots can dodge hits quite well against Pyramid Head, but there's an easy way to tell if it's actually a guaranteed hit because even the bots can't do anything about it. And I'm sure I might be showing a few examples on screen right now. And let's say right about now, you're perhaps seeing the one I hit on Sable outside Shack. And this is quite a good example of when I'm saying it can be a bit tricky to get used to. The Sable was hugging the wall of Shack, but I was aiming just straight on, not at her, which I think is the thing that can be a bit hard to get used to. Because in that situation, the only way she can dodge is to the left. But if your entire ability is just directed that way as well, then she either runs straight on, hugging Shack wall, that's a hit, or, of course, try and dodge to the left, which she won't be able to do in time because you're already aiming slightly to the left. So I'd say that's a really good example of what I'm trying to get at here. And as you can probably imagine, basically with every tip I'm giving here in the advanced section, you shouldn't expect to suddenly do all of that stuff perfectly. All of these things are what I'd say can take a bit of time to get used to. And I mean especially this guaranteed hit one, because as I showed earlier as well, from what I remember, there were a few abilities I kind of did in a bit of a panic almost. So it can be very easy to forget about this kind of stuff and suddenly just try and aim for where you think the person is. And of course, there are a lot of places where you can't really get a guaranteed hit in that way, especially since there are some maps where it is actually just a long, thin corridor, kind of. Like RPD, for example, there's a locker room where if you literally just aim down the middle, there's literally no way they could possibly dodge it if they are there. I don't think there's anything else for me to really say. Just really try not to always aim at where the survivor is. So with that being said, off to the next section. Alright, so hopefully you're seeing this in a better quality than whatever the last survivor perspective stuff was. So hopefully there isn't too much of a delay. I mean, if I swing now, it should hopefully be in sync and just moving about in general. And something you may have actually slightly noticed when I was showing the flicks earlier from how the survivors saw it. This animation right here, for the survivor, is so quick. It's like he puts the sword down instantly, isn't it? So if I try and do an attack the second I put the sword down, it looks like I'm waiting so long on the survivor side, doesn't it? And also, just another little fact about Pyramid Head. I'm nodding a whole bunch, as you can see. The survivors don't really see it. Look, his head doesn't move at all. Funnily enough, literally as I'm doing this, I only just noticed his hand doing some weird movement there. If he looks down, his hand goes more outwards. And then if he looks up, his hand goes into himself almost. I've genuinely never noticed that until just now. Well, I suppose that's a sign that he's actually looking up in reality. His other hand, though, with the sword, doesn't seem to change at all. But from what I can see anyway, the only sign whatsoever from him looking up and down is actually just his left hand for some reason. So just in general, for trying to blind Pyramid Head is a lot trickier, as you can probably tell. But anyway, that was just a side note. The main point of this is of course to show how the ability looks from the survivor's perspective. I was never really that clear on when you could use Pyramid Head's ability to bait a Dead Hard, for example. So I'm gonna assume many of you watching know what Dead Hard is. What you can usually do is try and bait a survivor into using Dead Hard, but most of them would usually of course go off the reaction of you swinging like this. But something you can do to throw them off a bit is when you of course go into his ability instead. Because if you're really alert trying to go for that Dead Hard, just really trying to watch out for when you're about to get attacked, then what you're going to watch out for is kind of just any movement with Pyramid Head. I don't know, I'd say when he's right next to you, you're not going to see the difference really anyway, are you? But what I'm trying to say is you don't even have to do his full ability, as you can see. So I'd say it's roughly when the charge up reaches the end of the text that his sword is fully in the ground. But for his hand to move whatsoever, it's actually almost straight away. In fact, I think it's the second his left hand reaches the sword from the killer's perspective. Now, I know that probably seems very niche, but just a little fun fact about Pyramid Head, there are those things about him which are probably a bit different to most killers. So basically, the quick recap I've shown so far is that putting his sword down in the ground actually looks different from both sides. The only sign of him looking up or down is actually based on his left hand there. Now, something you may have noticed from many of the gameplay I might have shown is that I actually do this little weird movement quite a lot of the time. So let's say around here, I just do that kind of thing. So from the survivor's perspective, me doing something like this actually seems a bit confusing, doesn't it? Pyramid Head shouldn't be able to do that from their perspective. So if you're wondering how this works, basically, during the charge up time, he still has completely free movement. Basically, normally when his sword is fully down in the ground for you to do the attack, if I press A, for example, now to go left, nothing happens. S to go backwards, nothing. D to go right, nothing. I can only go forward and then turn with my mouse. And that is the case all the way up until you actually do an attack or the second you let go of your ability. I know in the match I showed before, it probably looked like I had some really weird movement at one point, because I basically walked backwards the second I let go of ability or something like that. But basically what I'm trying to say with just his movement in general is don't forget, you still have completely free movement until the attack is ready, and you could use it to throw off survivors quite a lot. I feel like this throws off a survivor very much when they see you moving like that with his ability ready. Sorry if this seems a bit too stimulating with all the noises, but something else I forgot to mention is there's actually a difference in when you hear that sound as well. And just to double check, you should hear that attack at the same kind of time. I could just be saying a whole lot of nothing right now, but I feel like you can use that assumption survivors would have that your ability is already ready to go around here. Use that to your advantage around a lot of loops to throw survivors off. So just for the sake of being able to see where everything is, put a survivor over there, but let's pretend they're around where this trail is. Killer's over here. If he does this, I feel like it would throw the survivor off a lot. There's just a lot of angles they wouldn't expect, because to them, if you're here, this is what it should actually be, that you're going all the way around to then do that, if you were at the pallet. But instead, because I'm here, and I do that, I'm already aiming where I need to be at this point. Sorry if this doesn't really make much sense. And I mean, to be honest, I haven't really gone against Pyramid Heads who do that. They almost always just, you know, look like they're doing this kind of thing. But I do know from playing against survivors that they tend to get thrown off a lot by this little movement at the beginning. To be honest, I reckon that's it for the advanced and niche tips kind of stuff. That was generally all I had in mind for survivors' perspective. There is just one other thing I can think of, but it's more to do with how survivors would play against Pyramid Head. So there are actually two different types of survivors I struggle with the most. The first one, as would be for any killer, it's very good survivors, ones who really know what they're doing. However, the second type of player might not even be that good at the game. You know what it is? It's people who just W key. In fact, you know how I lost a game in the past? This was full of survivors who were way less experienced than me, by the way. Instead of going to any loops, they just ran across the edge of the map. Let's say, for example, we're at this pallet just now, ready to attack them. And let's say, in fact, I even hit them. Survivor then runs. Instead of then going to like this loop here or something like that, they just kept on W keying. They'd literally just run like this. And as I said before, Pyramid Head isn't actually the best for mobility. So in a crazy way, survivors are just W keying like this are tricky to deal with. And I guess, yeah, if you're watching this to know how to play against Pyramid Head, a lot of it is literally just doing what would normally seem really stupid. Like genuinely, not gonna lie, some of that stuff tends to actually work quite well against him. That's all I can really think of for talking about survivors' perspective. And also just remember that even around pallets like this, the best thing to do is to get those guaranteed kind of hits. Is to get the ones where the survivor is forced to drop the pallet, you know, or let's say they're waiting here at the pallet, you're doing a little standoff almost. The one thing you really don't want to do is be in some kind of situation like this. I mean, to be fair, in a pallet like this is so weak that you might even not need to use the ability at all, but especially with stronger loops. Really don't want to be doing some kind of gamble against the survivor where they're constantly trying to dodge you here and then you keep on trying to hit them. It's something I see so many Pyramid Heads doing. But that being said, I think that was everything I was gonna say for survivor stuff. Now, there are a few things I can think of also, just off the top of my head, that I haven't really covered. I know especially with using Pyramid Head's Trail, I didn't really say anything about that. And just in general, with the things I haven't really covered, it's because they're very specific scenarios usually, and it might depend on what perks survivors have. But here's a brief run through of the other stuff I can think of right now. Another thing about his actual attack I didn't really say is whenever survivors fall from a height, of course they have that stagger. So on a map like Dead Dog, where there's all those staircases where people then vault a window to then fall down, you can probably wait like maybe half a second after they vault, use the ability on that vault, and it'll probably be a guaranteed hit, unless they happen to have like balanced landing or something. But because of how specific that is with maps and everything, I didn't really think that was worth its own segment or anything. And then also, as I was just saying with the trails, if for example you think a survivor's hiding in a locker and there's multiple lockers nearby, you could put down a trail right in front of all the lockers nearby, open the lockers, and then if a a survivor goes out of another locker because they realise you're trying to check, they will then get tormented, of course. And a similar thing goes with picking survivors up. So if you expect the survivor to get saved when you pick them up, you could put a trail down where they're knocked, pick them up, and then if they get off, they're tormented. Bear in mind as well that if a survivor gets off you when you're carrying them, they always end up on your left. So you can put the trail there with that in mind. But again, as you can probably imagine, that's kind of why I haven't bothered really talking about it, because this is very specific stuff. It's not really game changing at all or anything. And finally, there were a few map specific stuff I had in mind, but again, I thought, you know what, let's just keep this to more general situations. But to be honest, what I'm going to say about that is what I also think is the same with just everything about Pyramid Head and with Dead by Daylight in general. If there's ever things that you struggle with, the best way to get better at it is to do it more. So ultimately, with Pyramid Head, I think the best way to get good at him is to play a bunch of him. I'd say this guide is more so to do with letting you know things you can practice and just to make you aware of certain things you can do. So, with all of that being said, I really hope this helped any of you watching. If there's anything really important I forgot to mention somehow, feel free to put it down in the comments. And with all of that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.